hitting on sleepers in your fantasy football drafts could be the difference between you winning a league and losing a league. And so these are guys that are going later in your fantasy football draft, but honestly, they're pretty serious sleepers in terms of what potential they could bring to your fantasy team. Let's talk about one of them, and this is a blast from the past, right? Let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins. Last year with the Chiefs, DeAndre Hopkins was actually fairly serviceable. Okay, he was the wide receiver 48. He had 80 targets, ended up having about 600 yards, but had 5 touchdowns. D-Hop still does have that red zone capability that we've seen. Obviously, he's not wide receiver 4 overall D-Hop, but he's still D-Hop that I think can produce a little bit. And when you're looking at, he had 11 red zone targets last year, and 5 of those, again, were touchdowns. I mean, that's a pretty high conversion rate. And for the rest of his statistics, really not to be notable at all. It's pretty clear. I mean, everybody would say that D-Hop is probably washed, and I totally understand that. But he's going as the wide receiver 75 right now in drafts, or he's ranked on the Flock expert consensus as wide receiver 75. And again, he finished as a top 50 wide receiver last year. And so when you're talking about your waivers and who you're drafting, I don't think D-Hop has top 20 upside. Like, I don't think he's a sleeper to be somebody that pops off this year. I think he's a sleeper because I think there's a decent chance we end up all picking him up off of waivers within the first 3 weeks. And if that's the case, then in some of our deeper leagues, we could definitely just go ahead and get D-Hop on the bottom spot of our roster right now. And again, D-Hop, the messages out of training camp have mostly been positive, right? You've seen the videos on Twitter of him, which means nothing. But Ravens beat writers are saying that they have a pretty good connection, Lamar and D-Hop. And the thing about the Ravens, they have I think it was the first overall offense, PFF graded offense last year, in the second overall PFF pass grading offense, just behind the Cincinnati Bengals. And so this is a team that obviously has, the MVP in Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, absolutely incredible. And they're going to continue to pass the ball at a high rate. There can be multiple productive receivers there, and we know, they have Mark Andrews, but he struggles to stay consistent. They have Zay Flowers, but he struggles to stay consistent, / he struggles to unlock any serious upside in this format. They also have Rashad Bateman, who is very boomer bust, but also did score somewhat last year and was somewhat fantasy productive. Outside of that, I mean, my point is, with D-Hop, I definitely think there is a world where D-Hop has a good enough season with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL where we end up picking him up off of waivers within the first couple weeks. So I think D-Hop is a little bit of a sleeper here. I think it's more than likely, again, sleeper picks, you're probably only going to hit on 1 or 2, and we totally understand that. We're like reaching down into our bag for this. I know that D-Hop is, not D-Hop anymore. I totally understand that. But he's in a situation where they value him pretty highly. All the reports have been positive so far. It's a very high octane offense, and I think he's going to get targets. We'll see if he can stay healthy. We'll see if it actually amounts to anything. But D-Hop's somebody that if you're again a 12, 14 team league or you have a deep roster, he might be worth a bench spot. Let's write it down. He's rostered about 50% of leagues right now. So
Dante Thornton's been getting a ton of training camp hype, really since the beginning, and even before that during OTAs earlier this summer. Obviously coming into what is a really crowded receiving room in Vegas, and you've got Jacoby Myers there, obviously, who's the proven veteran, the experienced veteran, who we do believe is pretty significantly undervalued pretty much every single year in fantasy. Jack Besh being the second round pick that they selected this season, and then Brock Bowers obviously is commanding 150 plus targets we would expect again this season. So was there really going to be room for Dante Thornton to command volume? We didn't really know. What we do know now is that schematically Dante Thornton is getting the majority of first-team snaps and first-team reps in training camp, and he's playing the role of the X-wide receiver in that offense. I mean, you're looking at his skill set. The reason that Pete Carroll was so interested in him is because he's 6'5" and over 200 pounds. His catch radius is ridiculous. He was an intriguing traitsy prospect out of Tennessee, and he honestly resembled DK Metcalf in a lot of ways in terms of his physical measurables. Now he's actually been able to improve his route running quite a bit, according to reports, beat writer reports, and the team themselves, the team itself. Chip Kelly actually really giving us some insight on what Dante Thornton has been doing during training camp and talking about his big catch radius, how quick he is, how comfortable Geno is pushing the ball downfield to him. Geno Smith has a lot of weaknesses as a quarterback, but one of his biggest strengths and one of the things that he consistently does and why he can excel at the NFL level after being a bench warmer for 10 years is his deep ball attempts and how efficient he is with those attempts. That's why DK Metcalf was so good with Geno for a couple of years. 5th in deep ball attempts last season, Geno Smith was, and true deep ball completion percentage, 44.1%. That was 3rd in the league. If Dante Thornton is going to be the first team starting true X wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders, there's legitimate upside there. like legitimate upside. And I know statistically speaking and analytically speaking, the likelihood of a 4th round wide receiver actually coming out and, you know, being a big time fantasy difference maker as a rookie, it's already so low that a 4th round wide receiver is going to hit anyways. But for him to be a fantasy difference maker, his rookie season is already very, very unlikely. Not to mention it's a crowded offense with Ashton Jency getting a ton of carries, Bowers getting a ton of targets, Jacoby Myers being the veteran presence there. Again, I've already mentioned all of those guys. But it looks like he's already honestly beaten out Jack Besh in terms of the first team snaps that he's consistently getting. And he's just a better schematic fit with Bowers and Myers on the field at the same time. I care for sleepers of the caliber of Dante Thornton, I just care that he's going to be on the field to have a chance to get those opportunities. And with Geno Smith and his history of taking a ton of deep ball attempts down the field, that's recipe for success for a guy like Thornton.
We have now available for you our best offer of the season. Our season pass over on the flockfantasy.com/domain website is now live. Again, super cheap price. You get literally everything we offer. You get our rankings, you get trade calculator, you get our draft guides, including the algorithm, our brand new 2025 tool to help you win your fantasy football drafts. You can check it out, and again, you can get all of it with the season pass. Plus, if you join with season pass with code domain, we can get you in a live league with us. So link is in the pinned comment. Again, you have to use code domain, but get that season pass, get everything you need. Is legit the best deal in the fantasy football industry. So go check it out. We've got it linked down in the comments below. And let's break down the Dolphins running back room as we kind of try to find a sleeper here real quick. Last year in 2024, in terms of carries, Devon Achane had 203 carries, right? Second in carries was Raheem Mostert, 85 carries. And third in carries was Jalen Wright with 68 carries. The next closest running back was Jeff Wilson with 16. And so really what you saw there was a 3-man committee between Achane, Mostert, and rookie at the time, Jalen Wright. Now, Jalen Wright was largely inefficient in his touches, 3.7 yards per carry, but Raheem Mostert was as well, got more carries and had 3.3 yards per carry. Only had 1 touchdown, and in terms of receptions, didn't really do a whole lot there either, and so, we're not looking at this saying, yeah, it's an absolute sure thing. He only had, 8 yards receiving on the entire season. He had 6 targets, he caught 3 passes, and so that's obviously an issue, but I do think it's something that they could end up using Jalen Wright as, and the point is looking at the carries here. Raheem Mostert, 85 carries vacated. And so they do have a fair amount of vacated carries, with Raheem Mostert leaving. Obviously, Jeff Wilson leaves behind 16 carries as well and more from the year before. Historically, looking at this Dolphins offense, I mean, this is an offense that when you're looking at some of their past seasons, they have been willing to spread the love a little bit. Let's look at 2023. Raheem Mostert had 209, Devon Achane 103, Jeff Wilson 41. And so again, you typically see with these Mike McDaniel offenses at a committee of 3 backs, right? And typically the second back is getting a pretty substantial amount more than the third back does. Given that Jalen Wright was the third back in the offense last year, given that Raheem Mostert left, given that they brought in Alexander Mattison, who's cheeks, and then Ollie Gordon, who, from a prospect standpoint, is cheeks, but is a completely different type of player. Ollie Gordon and Jalen Wright couldn't be more different in terms of their play style. I think Jalen Wright is set up to be the running back 2 this year. Obviously, you can make a prediction for any one of those guys to be the running back 2 in Miami. We think it's going to be Jalen Wright. And at the point where you have a guy who can be a running back 2 in an offense, most of the time in leagues that are deep enough, they're worth rostering. He's rostered right now in 56% of your sleeper leagues. And again, last year, 68 carries, 249 yards. From training camp, they said he's been getting plenty of work. He looks better this year. He's moving well, and obviously acknowledge that there are, there's pretty much an open competition at running back. But again, our pick is Jalen Wright. He's the most like Achane of that group, right? Alexander Mattison is not like Achane at all, and neither is Ollie Gordon. And so in terms of the other guy who would get receiving reps, I think it would be Jalen Wright. And it's an offense where, yes, last year was not great in terms of their rushing capability and things like that. But when you're looking back to 2023, when they had a healthy Tua, when they had a little bit better run blocking as well, that year they were third. They had the third highest rated PFF run offense. This is an offense that has a history of being a very high octane rushing offense. And so from a depth perspective, I think he's going to end up being the 2 there. He could be a sleeper because, again, he is sitting behind a guy in Devon Achane who, while he's managed to stay fairly healthy in the NFL, does tend to miss time, at least a little bit each season, whether it's concussion or something else like that. If that happens, you're going to have one of these guys stepping into the running back 1 role. Our guess it would be Jalen Wright, and at that point, you're going to be able to either ship him off and sell him high, or you're going to be able to put him in your flex spot when you desperately need a running back in there. Because, again, running backs get hurt all the time. And so whether it's as a handcuff to Achane or as somebody that you're just picking up off of waivers in hopes that maybe he does get a shot and he gets elevated, I think Jalen Wright's a pretty good sleeper pick this year. And honestly, he's not going to overtake Achane. He's not as good as Achane. But again, a lot can happen in that offense. It is an offense that will produce high-octane fantasy football running backs.
So Ben Johnson is now joining the Chicago Bears as the head coach there. Obviously, one of the biggest projections that pretty much everyone across the fantasy space is making heading into 2025 is that the Bears are going to take a significant step up in terms of their overall fantasy production because of what Ben Johnson offers as a play caller and the new head coach there, right? Caleb Williams, we expect to take a step up. Rome Odunze, we expect to take a step up. DJ Moore, we still expect to be decently productive. Colson Loveland, Luther Burden now have an opportunity to really eat into some of the target volume in that offense as well, given their skill sets and how talented they were as prospects heading into the NFL draft this season. And then you have the running back room. And that honestly has been the one thing that everyone has kind of just decided to ignore, even though it's been a pivotal aspect of Ben Johnson's successful offenses in Detroit. And no, the elephant in the room is like, okay, well, DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson aren't Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. I totally agree. The Detroit got rid of DeAndre Swift a couple years back because he had significant limitations. They drafted Jahmyr Gibbs over DeAndre Swift because of what Jahmyr Gibbs offered that DeAndre Swift couldn't for them, because his vision is so bad. Despite that, despite how limited DeAndre Swift is as a true runner of the football and how inconsistent he is in terms of his vision on the field, he still was pretty impressively productive while splitting a backfield with Jamal Williams back in 2022. Because if you remember, he was still in Detroit in 2022, and that was the first year that Ben Johnson was the offensive coordinator for that team. So when you look back at those years with Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift both playing on the field, Williams ended up being the running back 13 in 2022. He's never even gotten close to that level of production throughout his career, his 8-year career in the NFL. He had 262 rushing attempts for over 1,000 yards and 17 touchdowns with little to no receiving usage whatsoever. DeAndre Swift, on the other hand, had 99 carries. It was more on a per-game basis because he only played 14 games for 500 yards, 5 touchdowns, 70 targets, 48 receptions, 389 yards, and 3 touchdowns. This is not a DeAndre Swift video. I'm not even talking about DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift is being the one that's drafted much higher than this other guy in this offense who they are stuck with as their running back too. And that's Roschon Johnson, guys. I wouldn't be sleeping on Roschon Johnson this season. Not only is he a pretty decent handcuff to pair with DeAndre Swift, but as a true runner of the football, I think he could get his own in this offense. I'm going to go out on a limb this year and say that I don't think Ben Johnson is just going to stop running the ball because DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson are the two lead backs in that backfield. I repeat, Ben Johnson, and a majority of the reason that he's had success for so long as an offensive coordinator with Detroit for the last few years is how effective he is in the run game and how that opens up the field for him in the passing game. He can't just throw the ball 60 times a game and not run the football, or he loses his flashiness as a play caller. He's not going to stop it, guys, just because of how limited they are. Like they wanted to in the NFL draft this season. They wanted to draft Gentry. They tried to trade up. They couldn't get him. They wanted Henderson. They tried to trade up, and they could not get him. They went with Luther Burden instead. And they went with Colson Loveland in the first round instead. They are willing to ride out this season with Swift and Roschon, and I would expect them to get a decent amount of volume. Roschon Johnson really schematically is going to be that Jamal Williams or David Montgomery. He doesn't have the receiving skill set that DeAndre Swift has. DeAndre Swift kind of resembles the DeAndre Swift of the Detroit Lions because, it's DeAndre Swift. And he does have a solid receiving skill set when you look at him every single season since he came into the league. 57, 78, 70, 49, and 52 targets, regardless of what offense or what situation he is in. He gets significant and consistent target volume and opportunity. He will be that receiving back for Ben Johnson. And what we've seen historically with Ben Johnson offenses is he loves that 50-50 split. And when you look at Monty and Gibbs last year, no, this is not going to match what Monty and Gibbs did last season. Gibbs averaging 18.5 points per game. Monty at the same time in that stretch before the injury, averaging 16.5 points per game. I don't think that's going to be the case for Swift and Roschon Johnson. If it's 60 to 70% of that, Roschon Johnson is a pretty decent flex option in weeks where you're struggling struggling with injuries, bye weeks, etc., he's a pretty nice handcuff to get in late rounds. He's a nice flyer to take just in general, I think, in the last round of your fantasy draft.
Last year for the Indianapolis Colts, who led the team in yards? No, it was not Josh Downs. No, it was not Michael Pittman. It was actually Alec Pierce. And Alec Pierce has one of the most interesting statistical profiles of any player in the NFL, because you look at his statistical profile and you're like, okay, the dude is 60th in the league in targets. The dude is 70th in the league in receptions. He's 34th in receiving yards. He's 89th in yak. He's 97th in target accuracy, which shout out Anthony Richardson and whoever else is going to throw him the ball. But then you look at his profile and you're like, this guy has a lot of ones in some of these categories. What about ADOT? First in the league. Deep targets, first in the league. Yards per target, first in the league. Yards per reception, first in the league. Target premium, first in the league. It's like very interesting. And so you look at this, you're like, okay, this is clearly a guy that gets a ton of deep passes and converts them at a fairly high rate. His contested catch rate was 7th in the NFL last year at 58.3%. And given that his ADOT was over 20 yards per target, I mean, you can clearly see how this guy is used in this offense.
His ADOT per target, or his average depth of target, is 21.7, and his yards per catch is 22.27.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's how a non-factor he is in
with
terms
his
of yak.
with his yak.
That's hilarious.
His yak is 1.7 per target. Like that's literally like he's catching the deep ball and then falling over. Yeah, like stumbling for another yard and a half. So with Pierce, again, the thing about Pierce when you're looking at his game log last year is there were times he actually popped off 21 points, 16 points, 22 points, 18 points, 10 points, 10 points, 24 points, and 13 points. I just named you 8 weeks where he was in double figures. And he didn't always get high target, but again, those are all the weeks, they'll correspond, except for one 10-point game with the weeks that he scored touchdowns. Obviously, he's a touchdown-dependent guy. However, in best ball formats, in formats where you're in super deep leagues, like a 16-team, or I drafted him. I drafted him in our last live league. I literally took Alec Pierce in the last round because I'm like, I think Alec Pierce is a solid dude here. Because the thing out of training camp so far has been that Alec Pierce has been the most consistent and also has been consistently targeted, not just on deep throws. And that would be a pretty big change to how they use Alec Pierce. I don't think they're going to use him like that a ton. I think with Tyler Warren and Josh Downs and Michael Pittman, they've got the middle of the field covered. And so I'm not totally buying into all that. However, I will say, again, in certain league formats, and even in normal PPR leagues, people had to end up starting Alec Pierce because of injuries last year. Alec Pierce, like half of the time, delivered for you. And so, it depends on who's throwing him the ball. Obviously, we've seen that Anthony Richardson's going to throw Alec Pierce the ball more than probably Daniel Jones will. Anthony Richardson does look to be the leader in terms of the quarterback competition there, which is absolutely just freaking mind-boggling to me, but whatever. And so, he is somebody you should keep an eye on. Again, that room is wide open. I think Tyler Warren, if you're worried about him coming into that offense, he would take more away from Downs and Pittman than he would Alec Pierce, because Alec Pierce is literally not getting any of those targets at all. None of them. And so with Pierce, again, he's a boom bust, high upside, big play, touchdown dependent guy, but there's a role for that in fantasy football when you get into the middle of the season. And so he's a guy I think that could be a sleeper this year. Again, maybe he gets even more targets than we think. Maybe his ADOT goes down. They use him in the middle of the field a little bit more. I don't know. I don't like the offense. It's a bad offense, so it's not a good sleeper pick. But I do think it's worth mentioning Alec Pierce because he had such a good season last year, and he still continues to go extremely low in these fantasy football drafts, at least so far.
One of the biggest strategy points we've made in fantasy this year is not necessarily telling you don't draft an elite tight end up top, but understand that you are sacrificing a significant amount of depth and opportunity at wide receiver and running back if you are to take a Bowers, McBride, even Kittle or Kelsey in the 6th round, those types of tight ends. A lot of times we recommend that people fade tight end, take a shot on a guy in the 8th round or later. And one of the big reasons being you can get Zach Ertz in the last for the last pick in your fantasy draft. And as a 34 going on 35-year-old wide receiver this season, he's been in the league for so freaking long, and he's been so good consistently forever. He kind of revitalized his career in 2024. Thought this was going to be a last hurrah for him as he helped Ben Sinnott develop as a rookie, and he ended up just taking over and being the unquestioned tight end one in that room and looking really, really solid. He was actually top 8 in total targets among tight ends in the league last season, had like a 13% target share in that wide receiver room, or that total receiving room in general. He was actually 3rd in slot snaps, which is nice to see that a lot of his usage he's getting out of the slot. He's a nice, reliable option for Jaden Daniels, who's now going into the 2nd year of his career, going to continue to lean on Ertz, I would expect. 6 in total receptions, and then in total fantasy points, he was 7th. Zach Ertz showed no signs of really falling off at all. And honestly, the biggest argument that you could have against Zach Ertz this season is, hey, Ben Sinnott's going to take a step up. That's absolutely a possibility. We've seen that in the past. We saw it with another guy who was playing behind Zach Ertz and then took over the job. If you remember, it was, lo and behold, it was Trey McBride. When Zach Ertz was in the Cardinals offense there, and then he moved on after Ertz went down with the injury, and McBride came out and just started going crazy. There is always the off chance that a young tight end is just going to show up out of nowhere who is a previous day 2 pick and is going to produce and be amazing. This year, I'm not going to bet on that just because of how good Zach Ertz was last season and how I think that he doesn't really show statistically, analytically, any sign of regressing. I mean, he was 4th among tight ends in total touchdowns. He had 7 touchdowns. But again, with the red zone targets, he was 4th in red zone targets. Like, and running out of the slot, being a red zone target option, like that's just a reliable, consistent option that you're going to continue to target in the red zone, not to mention the big Terry McLaurin news. Do I think Terry McLaurin is going to end up not being a Washington Commander when it's all said and done? I don't think so, because we've seen this story before. Actually, the last time Terry got an extension in Washington, he did the same thing. He requested a trade. The extension didn't come until later, and then he finally got it, and then it was totally fine. He ended up being a Commander for the rest of the season, and look where he is now with Jaden Daniels. I don't think Terry wants to leave. I don't think the organization wants him to leave. I think they're going to work something out, and I think he's going to stay. What matters to me is the essentially the reliability of the receiving room and the consistency of the proven veterans that are already there. You've got a lot of moving pieces there. Deebo Samuel coming in. We'll see what he does as a gadget player in that offense. You got Jalen Lane, who I believe is making a lot of noise in that receiver room as well in training camp, but he's a day 3 pick as a wide receiver. We don't really know what he's going to offer, if anything. Honestly, it's pretty sparse, that receiver room is, because with Deebo being a wild card and Terry McLaurin now technically being a wild card, the only proven consistent receiving asset that you have there that's shown any semblance of being a reliable target for Jaden Daniels last season was Zach Ertz. Everything else is an unknown. And as a tight end who was easily a comfortable top 8 producing tight end last season, where he's going to continue to command that target share with no one else really coming into that room to contend for it, I think you're going to be looking at a really solid situation again for Ertz this season. Not where he's going to blow your socks off with production, but if you are to fade tight end completely, like not even take one in rounds 8 to 10, and you just want to take a 13th to 15th round shot on a guy, and then if he doesn't work out, you cut him, no sweat, and you go pick up a different guy who maybe shows some promise, Zach Ertz is really going to be your go-to.
So again, sleeper picks, we know we're not going to hit on probably most of these, not all of them. They're sleeper picks. They're hard to predict. If they were obvious, they wouldn't be sleepers, right? And so we're literally just like digging through the weeds here trying to find guys who could have potential upside. So let us know in the comments if you have any guys you should add. Make sure you drop a like and subscribe. If we hit 50K subscribers, we're going to get matching tattoos, and he's going to be pissed, so you should do it because it would be really funny. Also, get our season pass now available on flockfantasy.com/domain to unlock our brand new algorithm, our trade calculator, and rankings for this season. All of the tools on the site to do comparisons, data, etc. You get everything. Plus, you can get in a league with Nathan and I if you use code domain. So links in the comments. We'd love to have you guys. We appreciate you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.